My name is Elena Verna, and I run growth at SurveyMonkey. For you who are not familiar with growth, it's really running revenue optimization for the company. So I work on optimizing all of the funnels, reducing churn, increasing conversion, improving acquisition funnels. But my background is really in BI. I started in BI and all of and that's what drove me into growth. And what I want to talk today is how to really drive and position your BI group within the company, and what type of analyses you really need to do in order to drive. Wow, something is very exciting happening over there. All right. And what type of analyses and how to position the group that you really need to drive in order to position BI in the most optimal way for the company and for it to really drive not only the product map for the company, but to really grow the business and grow your revenue. So I'm going to start with a little bit about the company, just to give you some context, and I'll just dive into it. So, SurveyMonkey. How many of you are familiar with SurveyMonkey or have heard of it? Oh, nice. I like that. Okay, so for those of you who are not, we're a platform to make surveys. So people create surveys on our platform, they send it out, they collect results, and they make decisions off those results. Our slogan is the best decisions start here. I actually think BI should have the same slogan. The best decisions do start in BI itself. And by a quick raise of hands, how many of you are analysts or working within analytics? Fantastic. Okay, so this should be pretty relevant. So at SurveyMonkey, our mission for BI Group is to help business grow. That is the #1 goal for us. We answer what question. It's not really anything else, but really understanding the user and what's going on with the business. When we answer the what question, we actually positioned in the optimal way to answer that question. We work independently from any other group in the company. We don't sit under marketing. We don't sit under finance. We don't sit under product. We report pretty much directly to CEO because we don't want to be swayed with what we report by any other interests. We also span every single group in the company. So we do from marketing to finance to all of the product analytics, and that's just to create a very great view of the entire business. So when you're providing those decisions and you're providing those analytics, you can actually do it from all of the multiple directions. We're not a service function. I think this is very important for BI not to be in order to actually drive growth within the business. Because if you're a service function for other departments, then you actually lose your ability to really focus on what business needs to focus from the data perspective. Because if you're just answering everybody else's questions, you're not necessarily driving business forward in terms of where business should be focusing that they might not be thinking about that you can actually see in the data. So I think this is a very crucial point that BI should have its own mission and its own roadmap, so to speak, and really focus on analytics that you think are important, not necessarily on what business is important. Obviously, it needs to align and your analytics needs to drive business forward, but business does not always know what to look at, and they don't always know what type of questions to ask. I also view BI's role as very educational. We are here to really educate other business groups on how to read the data, what type of questions to ask, how to explain it. And this is very crucial because the more you educate and the more you tell about how to really interpret what you're showing, the more the people ask them the right questions and they think in those terms too. And that creates very data-driven atmosphere within the company as well. And the last thing I think that is extremely important for BI and for it to really function as a growth driver within the company is anticipating questions. I think the best analysis is always when you come prepared to the point where you answered all of the possible questions that can possibly come up. And what happens as a result is that you paint a really vague, full picture, after which everybody kind of knows exactly what needs to be done. And the way to do it is really to think about the analysis, like, okay, what is this group going to ask? What is that group going to ask? And come up with and do an extra analysis on top of it without actually just answering the specific question that potentially one of the business groups asked. So I'm going to start with I have 15 points here that I think are extremely important for every single BI group to do. And I would like you to ask me questions even in the middle if you have any, please, so we can start a conversation about it. I think #1 goal for BI is to identify that key metric. Every single BI group should know exactly that one number you wake up and you look at every single day. If you don't have that, and if you're trying to monitor 10, 15 KPIs that are coming up on your dashboards, you just get confused and you're not always going to catch something that potentially is going on with your business. With us, our number is actually, our metric is focused around paid subscriptions because SurveyMonkey is a freemium model and you subscribe. So whenever something's going on with that number, we know we need to look into it. Everything has to roll into that number. The way to identify it is really, it's probably just through trial and error because every single time there's a question about something, we always go back to that number. And I think it's extremely important for everybody to know that. What is that one key metric that if you had to look at it every single day to really identify what's going on with your business, what is it? And that's a really hard question to ask for your business and for your company to really identify, but everybody needs to know it. You need to keep an eye on it like a hawk. If that moves, that means it's a signal that something is going wrong, that something is potentially changing. It's extremely, I cannot emphasize how extremely important it is to have that one number for you. I think the next thing that is very important for BI is data needs to have its meaning. And I'm sure a lot of you know and somehow understand it, but I see a lot of BI groups that just report on numbers. They give those numbers forward, they put it in dashboards, they put it in reports, but they don't mean anything if they don't have a context around it. So when it needs to have a meaning. So, for example, I hear a lot of times people come up to me and say, oh, we have, let's say, 1,000 surveys that were created yesterday, or we had 100 new paid subscribers yesterday. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? I have no idea unless you tell me. So really paint a story around it, tell a story around that number is extremely important for BI in order to actually get your message across. And that's what really puts BI in a position where then you tell business of what needs to get done, because number on its own doesn't mean anything. And people can interpret that number very differently depending on from which point of view that they come. So it's extremely valuable for you from BI as an analyst to provide that context for them. So for me, in the example of 100 new paid subscribers were yesterday, that doesn't mean anything. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. I actually really love using words such as soft, strong, weak. Is it expected? Is it not expected? So when you see a line, okay, we had 100 new paid subscribers yesterday. It was soft 10% year-over-year growth. You know, okay, there was 100. There was 10% year-over-year growth. So you know at least how your business is growing. And you know the soft at this point actually means we expected it to be stronger. I mean, that actually at least paints a picture. So whenever I report on any single number, I never just put it out there and expect other people to really give me interpretation of what it means or to make their own decisions. You kind of need to guide people into it, and by using such words as strong, soft, weak, tough, usual, expected, it really paints a picture around it. And at the end of the day, people know exactly what you mean and exactly what that number is supposed to be. And when we even speak outside to our board of directors or to our exec team, we never, ever, ever just give them the number. So of course the dashboards will go out and people will ask questions, but you always need to put it in context. I think it's number one thing, and as an analyst, you have the most context out of anybody in the company. So it's absolutely crucial to have that as a constant what you're supposed to be doing every single time you report on anything. I think the other thing that a lot of BI focus is very frequently on revenue, and it's actually on some paid subscriber metrics. And that's because what actually business is measured by, that's what businesses really cares about, how much money we make at the end of the day. However, I find that it's extremely important to know your engagement. So your key metric might be about your paid subscribers, but knowing your engagement is above it all, because what rolls into your paid subscriptions, rolls into your revenue. So really nailing it down and understanding it back and forth is absolutely crucial. So what I have here is actually one of the analyses that we did at SurveyMonkey. We're about surveys. We call survey deployed when it actually receives responses, and we have a number of responses collected. And what you see here, for example, is a heat map of our conversion. So we're a freemium model. Everybody starts and they don't have to pay for the product. And if they need some extra features, then they pay for the product. So you can see as you're getting into more surveys and into more responses, your map becomes very dense and conversion goes up. So just to know basics like that about your business and what correlates with a high conversion and what correlates with driving your revenue is extremely important, because then I can work on this and product can work on this to really drive revenue, as opposed to just focusing and thinking, how can I optimize the funnel? How can I do this? How can I do that? Does that make sense? Any questions so far? No questions. Okay. So my next thing is, and you probably heard it a lot of times, but obviously correlation does not mean causation. Just because I'm going to make a user deploy an extra survey does not mean that they're going to convert, obviously, unless I can A/B test it and actually prove it that it's true. So A/B testing is everything. At SurveyMonkey, we do so much A/B testing. I mean, we test anything and everything from pages to flows to every single metric possible. But I also don't think you can ever find true causation of any single metric. I mean, people say you have to test to find that causation, but causation has to be so. The experiment to really prove true causation has to be so well organized in such a lab-like atmosphere that you're really driving, if I change this, can I also affect that? There's never true causation, but you can find if something's driving something. But never assume that just improving one metric because you see that it's correlated with a number will actually drive improvement to your numbers. And I think it's extremely important for BI to be involved in actual testing that's happening in the company, from defining sample sizes to figuring out if results are significant or not, and to really connect it to what numbers are doing in the company. I also see that a lot of companies focus on conversion. I think this is very slippery slope for a lot of people, because conversion can really be affected by a lot of things. So conversion is usually, okay, how many new paid users did we get versus how many users do we have overall on the site? So in simple terms of how many we actually convert. So if we bring in 100 and we convert 2, then our conversion rate is 2%. That's a problem. I mean, it depends so much on the denominator of how many users you bring in. So for example, if I open floodgates for our product, and I don't require any registration, for example, I'm all of a sudden going to have a bunch of users and my conversion rate is going to tank. But at the end of the day, the revenue that I'm actually getting from those users can stay exactly the same. So my conversion will go down, yet my business is doing exactly the same. Or I very tighten up that funnel, create many steps to weed people out that are not going to get engaged. My conversion all of a sudden can triple, can quadruple, but I'm still making the same amount of money. So I think it's very dangerous to focus on conversion itself only without context of everything else that's going on. I think it can lead to very wrong decisions, because if you measure yourself on conversion and you improve your conversion, you actually does not mean anything in terms of you improving your business. Understanding timing. It took us a while at SurveyMonkey to actually get to the bottom of it. It's very important to know how fast your user is going to get engaged. Are they going to get engaged within the first 5 minutes, within the first 10 minutes, within 24 hours, within 7 days, within 28 days? It's crucial to know this, because then you can actually define what engagement periods are you measuring. Are you measuring 7-day conversion rate? Are you measuring 7-day engagement rate? Or is everything happens within 24 hours and then everybody kind of drops off, and that's when majority of the activity happens? It's not only extremely important to know it, but it's very important to recheck it frequently. As your product and your company evolves, this can change. If this changes, then you're actually looking at incorrect metrics at that point when you measure new engagement and so on. So we try to look at it at least every single year. I think that might be not even enough frequency if your company is evolving even faster. But to know the funnel and to know where everything's happening and the timing of it is absolutely crucial, because then it lets product make the right decisions of where they actually need to focus. Does product marketing need to focus right away in the product and really engaging people? Or can they wait 7 days? Because usually it takes 7 days for people to really figure out what's going on. So I think this is absolutely crucial. The next thing is really understanding behavior of users. Not a lot of people focus on this, which I think is extremely important. So, for example, if you have some sort of pricing page in the company, how many times does it take people to see it before they actually convert? That's a question everybody should know off the top of their head, because that's actually important for every single stage of the product. Where in the product majority of conversions happen, or majority of monetization happens? Is it at the beginning? Is it down along the engagement path? The timing obviously is important. You should know that too, because that's what really takes to know your business and to know your product. How many users are returning? So if you're converting and then there's some sort of churn is happening, how many of them are you actually retaining back? These are very important questions to ask. And what are the use cases? Not a lot of data can be actually acquired through use case unless you ask people up front exactly what they're trying to do and who they are. But through email domain analysis or similar, maybe some information about what they're actually doing in the product can tell you a lot, and overlaying that with everything else can actually surface you very interesting findings. So for example, one use case may be only seeing some sort of pricing of yours only once versus the other needs to see it 10 times before they convert. I mean, it really defines your price sensitivity of your customer, and then you can actually target them correctly from product perspective. Know your funnels. So we talk about funnels a lot at our company. I mean, we know our engagement and billing funnels back and forth. You should too. For billing funnels, what I mean is really going from pricing to checkout to order, how many people drop off. This has a lot to do with web analytics. You might not be recording this in your database because this is obviously a lot of information, but layering on the web analytic piece, whether it's from Google Analytics or any other web platform that you're using, and connecting it to actually user level in your data warehouse is extremely important. Your engagement funnel as well. So for us, it's from the starting your survey to editing your survey to really sending out. What are the drop-off points? Because you might think, oh, my product is very easy to use. But if your drop-off points are 30 to 40% at every single stage, that is the what question that you're answering that really can help you to focus, for the company to really focus on where it needs to focus. It's very important to know your breaking points. Where are people abandoning those funnels? Every single funnel you have on your site. And what are the biggest gaps? As I said, if it's a 40%, then that's quite an important piece of information for anybody to know to really focus on optimizing that. And again, overlaying that with all of the use cases and all is obviously very important, but just on the top of the head, like I know exactly what the drop-off from pricing to checkout across our entire site at SurveyMonkey. So I know if I want to move that metric, what I need to focus on. Cohorts, or I call them roll-ups, fruit roll-ups. How many of you have done cohorts for your company here? Not so many people. I actually think it's one of the finance uses cohorts a lot because that's how they used to model and to revenue and predict what's going to happen in the future. But it's one of the first things that we actually did at our company to really understand our user base. And these are fake numbers, but what you do is you find a cohort of users. Let's say that every cohort is defined by a month in which they signed up. And then every single month you check how many of them left. Cohorts can be from the paid perspective or from the just activity perspective. So from paid perspective, if I sign up 100 users at point 0, in month, so at 1, I sign up 100 users. At month 2, I only have 85 left. At month 3, I have only 60 left. And that was in 2011. And then I compare it to the next year and I say, okay, well now actually in 2013, I only have 75 left. So my retention is actually going down. It's extremely important how these cohorts behave for you in the company and where your data is trending. Are you actually increasing your base? And that number, 100 at the beginning, is growing so fast that you're just retaining less, and at the end, at month 5, you're still having the same users. Well, in this example, yeah, I signed up 100% of the users, so 100 will start at the beginning, but I only have 55 or 45% left, so my retention is a lot worse. So knowing this and comparing it year over year, and that's not only for paid users, so we do the same for logins. How many people log in after a month of creating an account? 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Then it really lets you know how many people are still active at your site 6 months after sign up. How many of those, for example, actually you monetize and you convert into something paid versus not. And to know this is just not knowing only your business and what the drop-offs are. It really helps you focus on whether you need to focus on actual retention if your drop-off is really steep, or acquisition, if your drop-off is not very steep, so you just need to work on bringing more people into the funnel. Which takes me to the next point of actually knowing your churn. And churn can be defined by many things. So, for example, inactivity. Inactivity on the site can be defined as churn. Or as you paid, and then you stop paying. That's a churn as well from paid perspective. But you need to know it by cohort. You need to know how many people churn in their first term, second term, third term. However you define your terms within your company. Because what you'll probably find in the first couple of terms, people churn a lot, and then it just pretty much drops off. And that's very important because then your overall churn number that you're focusing in your business is really broken down, and you know exactly which areas you need to focus on. By reason, too. So not a lot of people know actually where their churn is coming from. It's very important to know if the cart fails, for example, or the user churns intentionally, or do they request a refund. And monitoring those reasons is crucial. And compare year over year. Again, this is all about having a context around your number. You cannot just look at the number and say, oh, I've churned 500 users yesterday. Is it up? Is it down? I don't know. So always look at it in terms of context of what it actually means. How old are our users? I actually took this idea from Evernote presentation on their freemium model. I don't know if you guys ever seen it. Their CEO did it. And they did it by you're looking on the x-axis at the time that the user signed up for the account or just visited your site for the first time. And then you track how many of them are with you today. And you build your user age base, so to speak, and then today you can see, okay, how old are your users? It's very interesting to find that for your own company. If you know that only 30% of your users that are active on the site today actually came from this year, and 70% are older cohorts that came from previous years, that's just very important for you to understand. Again, do you need to focus on acquisition, retention, or so on? Because that drop, and this is very close to our example, is it's very steep in the first year, and then it just flattens out. And it's actually the same case with Evernote. Once the people engage and they really stay past the first term or past the first year, they never leave. So to know that is very, very interesting. It's very fun to play around with because you can not only do it for activities, so in terms of actual how many people are on the site and still active, but for your paid subscriber base as well, and how many people are still paying for you that, to say, signed up 5 years ago, to have these percentages. Has any of you done this type of analysis for your company? It's very interesting, isn't it, to understand it? I think it's fascinating. Couple of other things that we've done that were really fun is actually connecting our data to some of the outside sources. And those outside sources are very frequently free. Have any of you used research.google.com/tables? So it's a very interesting project by Google that when you search for some of the information on it, it actually gives you tabular output of your data. So instead of, for example, if you're looking for something on Wiki, you need to copy, paste in Excel and then try to import it in a database, this gives you data in Excel format already. It's quite fascinating. And you can search for a whole bunch of information. So it pretty much takes everything that you can find on the web that is data and puts it in a tabular form for you already. So what we've done is our market penetration by country. So you can search for something like how many internet users there are in each country. And then you can see how many users you have in that country. And then you can calculate your penetration in each market. Obviously, it's going to be a relative figure because who knows how many internet users there are in I don't know, Saudi Arabia, but at least it gives you a comparison point of where your penetration is really high for the market and where it's very low. And then you can actually focus on the markets and model after the markets that have really high internet penetration. If it's not internet, you can actually, I'm using internet because our company is internet, but you can find a whole bunch of information there in terms of actually how many users that are qualified for your product are in each country. And then you can actually also, again, I'm not meaning to sound like a broken record, but you can actually focus on conversion versus churn. So you can see, okay, if my conversion is very good and I have a lot of users in this market, how many do I actually churn by the market? The other one this will make us very hungry, is compare yourself by GDP or Big Mac Index. Big Mac Index is very interesting because McDonald's actually spends a bunch of time and resources to figure out how much to price Big Mac in every single country. I mean, they have huge departments doing that. So if you actually compare your prices to that Big Mac Index, you can actually somewhat understand how your pricing, I mean, compared to US, obviously, this is in the most the market that you probably know how well you're priced. Are your prices right? Is your pricing offering correct? And I mean, a lot of it obviously has to be focused, it should be sitting in product and billing, but BI can really help them understand of where those, where we potentially have to work on which markets. And again, GDP is kind of the same concept. It's, you see how much people make on average in each country, so you need to make sure that your price is aligned with average income in each country, but that's a little bit more, it's a little bit more tricky just because you can have just a lot, very big, low, let's say low income earners and very few points just skewing it. So it's more of an average, so I don't really like it that much. I like Big Mac. I think that's one that's interesting. And they keep track of your inflation. Because when you're looking at it today, that may be one thing, but if you look at it, for example, and you compare it to Big Mac Index a year ago, that can mean absolutely different thing because inflation, for example, in countries like Russia or India, those prices change so frequently, you really seriously need to evaluate this potentially every 6 months. Because not that you want to change your prices necessarily every 6 months, but just to know where you stand in that country. The one other important thing that I do want to focus on that I don't think everybody always thinks about is that BI and the data really will help you answer what question. What is happening with my users? It does not help you answer why. Because why is really behavioral in terms of why did user decide to click on this button versus that? Why did they decide to sign up versus not? So for me, we do a lot of analytics and push them into the products and saying this is what is happening with our product. However, you need to talk to users to really say why. And I'm not saying BI should talk to the users because that is a user research that's probably sitting elsewhere, but you need to push for people to really layer on top of it of user research and talking and so actually why it's happening. But you can provide them actual data sets of users that have that interesting behavior, and then they can actually overlay that why piece on top of it. And at the end of the day, you obviously need to know both why and what, because even though what can potentially signal a huge area of improvement, why can actually tell you that, hey, this is just the way it is and it has to happen that way. So you don't really need to focus your efforts on it. And these are, and of course, you can use SurveyMonkey to figure out why, just shameless plug. But at the end of the day, those are the two questions that you need to answer to really grow your business. And I think what is probably 80 to 90% of it, and then you overlay why to really signal if that's the area that you need to focus, and then you just go on to test. And after you test, then you know your question. And for example, in testing for us, we fail probably 9 out of every 10 tests that we kick off. And failure really means that, okay, now at least we know that strategy doesn't work. So failure is really just another learning for us. And then we do succeed. We succeed really big in that 1 out of 10, maybe sometimes 1 out of 20, but it's very important to just iterate. And our growth team really works closely with BI team to really take those findings from BI and implement them into the product, because BI is really can drive those incredibly valuable insights that will help your business grow from quantitative point of view, as opposed to just making decisions that potentially just somebody overnight in their sleep thought of and decided that that's a good idea to do. And for SurveyMonkey and in our company, it's been extremely valuable and it's been extremely beneficial. And we obviously can't preach to have our users make decisions on the data. We make every single decision internally on our data, and we've been very successful doing that. I think it's a very good strategy. Any questions? No questions at all. Yes.
Everything boils down to what the bottom line is for a company, right? how far up the line do you go? You said, hey, conversion's not where it is. So I'm just kind of curious to get your opinion on how far up you go.
Sure. So the question is, how do you actually identify your key metric? Because revenue should be ultimate your key metric that you watch, but you don't watch, let's say, oh, I made $20,000 yesterday versus I expected 25. Is that a good driver for me to really understand that that is my key metric? Or how far below do I go in terms of identifying it? So I think revenue is not a good metric at all. That's just, it varies because of FX rates or whichever happens. So I wouldn't consider revenue. I wouldn't consider overall number of, let's say, users or whichever you have, because for us, for example, it's very important the inflow of the new users. So we focus on that new number very heavily. Versus for some businesses in a different stage, it might be important to focus on the outflow. So you focus more on churn and how many you lose. So it's your business focus. Are you driving your business to really bring in the new subscribers or to retain the existing ones? Most of the time, the question is bringing new, right? So you have how many new users. I mean, a lot of times in the quarterly updates for any company, it's how many new subscribers did you drive? I mean, that's a good one because it will signal you, is your acquisition healthy? Is your potentially conversion healthy? That's the monetary value of new income that's coming in, the inflow that's coming into your company. I think going a lot deeper than that, you can actually miss some of the signals that your business is actually having. So for example, if we go all the way down to just how many new surveys that people sent out yesterday, that actually doesn't tell me of how many people actually converted into a paid subscription. So I'm missing that top layer, so that cannot be my key metric. Versus how many new, for example, paid subscribers I have, then it kind of tells me, okay, well, to convert, I need to deploy, because nobody's going to deploy and not convert, right? So I can kind of see how my engagement is going, how acquisition is going, and how that my conversion is going. So for me, that's a good metric to focus because that's where the focus of my business is at. But it's really trial and error. We went through many, many metrics to really figure that out, and we went through many iterations. But it was really at the end of the day, whenever we were talking about the numbers, and especially if we had some sort of issue that we were discussing, what is the number that we were most worried about? And that was it. Revenue just comes as a end result of that number. So that's how we identified ours. But it's really, what is it in the meetings you bring up the most? Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yes?
So it sounds like your growth team is separate from your BI team, and you've got a growth team, of course, you're under the CEO. What is your growth team comprised of? It sounds like that's probably top-down driven initiative. Hey, this is something we're going to do, and that kind of thing.
It's actually not true. It's bottom up. So we work, in some companies, BI and growth is the same. In some companies, they sit parallel to each other. It actually doesn't really matter. My growth team completely takes initiatives that come out of BI, and we pretty much productionalize them, and we iterate on them. So CEO, he is really, I mean, it's for us to figure out what the opportunities are. And the point is to be data-driven and to really have your data tell you where you need to focus as a business. Because if your CEO tells you, oh, I think we need to focus on this, and if there's no data behind it, I'm not going to focus on it. Because if I can't justify my efforts in terms of seeing actual opportunity in the data, then no, I'm the biggest client of BI pretty much, and I generate majority of the work for BI. I was in BI before, and I mean, it's very hard to draw a distinct line between us. And a lot of companies don't have growth. Growth is actually somewhat of a new concept. I think LinkedIn started it, but it's really, to me, it's always in Sol and other companies as well, is like, what do you identify as problem areas in your data for your users? And then you go and fix it with growth department. Because potentially some of the product areas, they just don't have time because they're focused on actual development of the product as opposed to optimization. Whereas we're just focused on optimization, and BI group should be focused pretty much on optimization as well and driving growth within company. Yes?
What's your relationship like with marketing?
With marketing? It's a love-hate relationship. So for me, marketing, it depends if they're data-driven marketing or not. So a lot of times I work with product marketing to figure out, hey, these users, they have high propensity to convert into this line, so we need to advertise that line to them in product, for example, or we need to send them an email about it, telling them about it, because they have very high propensity to convert on this issue. And our marketing department is very driven, and it's great, and we work very hand in hand with it, but a lot of times, a majority of the marketing departments are not very data-driven, which makes it a very frustrating relationship to work with, because they actually, not only they don't measure their actions, but they don't look at the data to actually make the decisions. It's something work or did not, but they just think, oh, it's creative, let's push it out, which is a big problem. So we always tell, we drive the atmosphere, measure, measure, measure. We do not push anything in the product until we actually measure that it does us some good. And we interact with our marketing team the same way. But our marketing team does not have their own analysts. So just to give you an idea, we do all of their measurements and all of their optimizations because we don't trust them. Yes? So obviously it helps if your exec team wants to use data, right? And if they're data-driven. It's really about, when I started, we had no data analytics within the company at all. And what you really need to prove is that you can identify those areas in very concise way and tell of where the biggest opportunities in your business are. The moment BI can actually provide, hey, this user group needs to see X, or it has a big problem doing Y, and you need to work on it. And the moment you can actually provide those suggestions, that the moment that you actually start becoming the pretty much definer of where the business is going to go. Because then that was my question, but that was my point about the context. If you just shoot out numbers without telling anybody what they mean or really giving people context around them or diving deeper into it, you're never going to make an impact in the company. Versus if you really say, hey, if the person sees my pricing page at least 5 times, their propensity to convert is higher. We need to expose more people to pricing page and at least test to see if our conversion will go up, because then they're going to be aware of the product and all of the extra features that they can get if they convert to a paid subscription. And if they test it and if it really comes out true or not true, whichever, at least we've tested it and saw what happens, that becomes extremely valuable. So then everybody goes, oh, well, what else do you have? What else can we focus on, especially after a couple big wins? And we've had those couple big wins. At this point, every single person in the company, before doing really anything, they go to BI and ask, hey, is this worth it? Can we do it? And then on top of it, we tell them, hey, no, that's not worth to do it. You should focus really on this, because we've done this analysis and we've proved that this area is really an area where we need to work on it. And that's how we started defining our product map. So it's really being vocal and really giving that context and storytelling and educating people of what it actually means to read the data and make decisions off of it. Because let's face it, besides outside BI, not everybody knows how to read the data and how to make decisions off of it. So it's the biggest thing to give them the value of what it can actually provide. So for me, it's always being very outspoken and very pushy in terms of my analyses and providing product suggestions on top of it as well. Yes?
How long are you running your A/B tests? How long are you trying?
Oh, well, that all depends on how much traffic you have and what your lift that you're hoping to measure. So you can't run it for too long, because then every single little variation will be deemed significant, because then you're looking at 2 populations, and even 0.00001 change can be deemed significant. If it's too small, then it might be just random variation that something happened, right? So you need to know your success metric ahead of time, what you're measuring it. You need to know your sample size that you're trying to reach and what error that you're willing to accept due to random variation. And there's plenty of calculators actually out there on the web just tell you, like, hey, if my success metric is this, and this is the confidence level that I want to achieve, what's the sample size I need to have? It's somewhat simple, but it's very important to define that ahead of time, because if you just kick off the test without really knowing how long you need to wait and what you need to do, then it's all bad. And actually, solutions like SiteSpect or Optimizely, they will provide you, and they'll tell you when you reach confidence or not on your tests, if you set up your response points correctly. Yes?
How do you know if some of your numbers are good? Like, do you ever compare it to other companies? How do you get that information? Like your retention?
So, for example, you need to find maybe not your competitor, but somebody similar in a business. So, for example, we compare ourselves to Netflix a lot because we're freemium. You can subscribe after, like, what's your churn number with that? You'd be surprised, especially if you reach out to other companies, potentially obviously under NDA, how many of them will be willing to share just high-level numbers with them so you can compare yourself. So, for example, one of our churn reasons is just people declining their cards. Like after a year, because we have annual subscription, after a year, a lot of cards just expire. So we had certain percentage of our churn attributed to that. And we reached out to Linda and we reached out to Netflix and asked, hey, what's your rate? And they were very happy to provide us, like, this is what standard is, and this is after we worked on it for a while. So then we knew, hey, we have a 10% window, let's say, to work on, to really improve it, to work with our payment auth engines to really do some sort of auto-updating function on it and to really reach out to these users better. So we go and we talk to other people. And I mean, everybody has a connection to somebody. So somebody worked with those people before. So that's how you just get an introduction. And we talk to them all the time. And people are very willing to share those numbers, especially, I mean, you give a little, you take a little, right? So you share back and forth. Anything else? Okay, so feel free to talk to me afterwards if you'd like. We're done with Q&A. My email is elenav@surveymonkey.com if you're interested to reach to me or if you have any other questions. We're hiring for our BI team if you're interested. Again, shameless plug. But I do think BI team, I mean, it's the heart and pulse of the company, so make sure to just have as much of an impact as possible, because the moment you prove it and the moment you really give out all of those suggestions and you do all of these extra analytics, even if they're not asked for you, you can really make a huge impact and be completely instrumental into how company grows and where it evolves. All right? Thank you very much.